well, it's like I said, any profession, once you know something, there's always something else you can be better at, something new to learn. It's ongoing. It's ongoing. It's like life. Can't get too comfortable in life.
Today we're going to be talking about exaggeration. We're going to focus mostly on kind of the two primary ways you guys will be using exaggeration, at least at first. And that's going to be in the exaggeration of poses and in timing. But we're also going to touch on a couple more advanced ideas of exaggeration, just so you can be thinking about it as you go through these classes. So we're also going to talk about exaggeration of ideas and exaggeration of personality. Exaggeration is one of the 12 principles of animation. Exaggeration is essential to creating a solid scene. Exaggeration may not be as cut and dried as squash and stretch, for example, where you want to squash and stretch when you do a bouncing ball, and it's a lot easier to try to describe squash and stretch maybe than it is to try to explain when you want to exaggerate or what you want to exaggerate. But we're going to give it our best shot. Well, what is exaggeration?
Exaggeration is one of the most important aspects of what we do. Without it, our work would be lost.
Exaggeration to me is taking the mundane things in life and just punching them up.
Exaggeration, when used correctly, can go a really long way towards the creation of an emotionally evocative scene, or a scene that really speaks to an audience and that they can really identify with and appreciate and enjoy and laugh at.
You gotta take what you see and you gotta up the ante. You gotta take it to the next level, because the medium in which we're evaluating the image that's what we're watching is two-dimensional.
Whenever you're creating animation, you're creating a 2D plane of information. And there's a lot less information being delivered from that than there is in the real world. When I'm sitting here talking to you guys, it's a true three-dimensional experience, and there's sound and there's color and there's binocular vision and everything. When you're putting something on the screen, you're losing a lot of information. Therefore, the information that you are giving usually has to be punched up a little bit to tell the same story, even if it's a realistic, animation.
Once you get something that you think, looks kind of right, push it further and see what it looks like. Why not?
The great thing about animation is that it's not something that you would go out and see in the world. It's not something that you could turn a camera on. It's stylized motion, and that's your chance to put that something extra in there. It's like surreal. It's like the dream quality, and it's the thing that excites people, I think, when they see it.
You'll find when you're animating that exaggeration is something that you're going to use all the time, and you're going to use it in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons.
Without exaggeration in your animation, it's going to be boring.
You put in the time and energy into planning all of your work, but now you're going to exaggerate it. You're going to push it into something that's special and unique and different and interesting to watch and isn't boring. Something that has that spark of life that would otherwise be missing.
The main reason for exaggerating is to not bore the audience. They don't want to be forced into a theater or watch TV and everything is boring.
You want to keep their eyes glued to the screen, and one way you do that is with exaggeration.
Just push it. Push it with the pose, push it with the face animation, just take it to the next level.
One of your biggest opportunities to exaggerate is with your poses.
You need to take the key poses and you need to exaggerate them.
You have to exaggerate even what you see in reference. envy what you see in the real world.
If you were to take a live video of someone acting it out a shot and then you just traced right over it and showed it, it would be such a boring scene.
You're going to want to be exaggerating those poses to find something more dynamic, more exciting, more powerful, more forceful.
You're only taking key points, and then I'm using that as an idea for a pose or the way it's staged, and then I put it in my shot, and then you have to take that and then push the pose.
If it's just traced, there's nothing that is you in that animation. There's nothing that has that little bit of your own soul and your own ideas and your own artistic sensibilities in the scene.
In a case of acting by yourself or asking somebody to act, it's a human, so it's not enough. So I usually exaggerate much more.
If you just take your video reference and you just take the timing straight from the video reference and you don't layer in any principles of animation and you don't push anything or exaggerate anything, you're going to end up with something that's really boring to look at.
With a jump, it's how much anticipation do you have or squash before the character goes? And then how high does it go when it gets there? And to me, that is exaggeration.
You can go through and film all your reference and do all your thumbnails, and you're going to find a lot of really interesting poses that you might not have thought of otherwise. But once you find those poses in the video reference, you probably don't want to copy them verbatim.
The body's so subtle that when you videotape it, a lot of the stuff you can't even really see. So then you always want to try and fluff it a little bit for the screen to make it a little bit more dynamic. In general, that's what our characters are, is sort of exaggerated versions of ourselves.
If your character's sad, really push his character, which will push his pose. So he's going to be sad. Look, did my dog die? I'm just so sad.
You want to push those poses into something more exciting, more dramatic, something more dynamic that's really showing off forces in the body and the forces that are occurring in the motion.
You can sort of bend it to your will. I mean, you're the artist, you're the creator, so you can just take things that much further. It kind of goes back to cheating, I guess, a little bit, but it's you can do what you need to do to get that pose or that the motion you're looking for.
If your character is going to stand with his arms crossed and in your reference your character's like this, why don't you make him look more forceful and exaggerate the arms up a bit more, arch the back a little bit.
I don't care what pose it is, unless it's the most extreme action that you can find, you could probably stand to push it a little further.
You just want to find a great line of action in your pose, and you want to exaggerate the silhouette as well. You want to make sure the audience reads what you're going for.
Timing is definitely one of your best opportunities for exaggeration.
We want to get to poses quicker. We want to hold poses longer than we could possibly hold in real life, just to sell the idea that this thing is just bigger than our universe. This guy, he's fast, he's snappy. If he's sad, he's slower.
You know from your reference that, okay, well, it took me 27 frames to get from point A to point B. Alright, that's fine, but if you just stick with that and all you're exaggerating is the poses and all you're exaggerating is the ideas and you're leaving the timing exactly how it was, you're really missing out on a great place to be exaggerating.
Because nobody wants to see just reality. Copying life it's live action. It's not really interesting.
You can push it a little bit, but try to remain consistent in your character's snappy timing. And a good example of that is the caterpillar from Bug's Life. He's a big fat dude. You don't expect him to move snappy, but oh my god, candy corn! And he turns and he gets that candy corn. One of the coolest scenes in that movie. So you have to keep the audience entertained by exaggerating real life physics.
The other thing about exaggeration is that, which isn't often touched on, is that exaggeration doesn't necessarily mean making something bigger. Sometimes exaggeration means making something a lot smaller, like making a pause, completely deadening the action, like for an exaggerated, for an extremely long time. That's an exaggeration. So exaggeration actually works in both directions.
Sometimes you're exaggerating pauses not to be longer, but to be shorter. You're creating moments that are less than they were in reality, and some that are longer than they were in reality. And in doing that, you're creating a movement style that is slightly caricatured, and thus, way more interesting to look at.
I think a lot of people on a computer tend to have very even timings because it's real easy to go in and set your keys on every 10th frame, every 5th frame. So that leads to a lot of very, very heavy syncopation. That happened a lot on the Troll because he would take 2 steps and then hammer. So a lot of times it would be 1, 2, 3. And one of the things I learned at Phil Tippett's studio is to break up the timing. And Phil was very percussive when he gave animation feedback. He would say, "You're doing it like this, bum, bum, bum," when what you need to do is like this, ba-da-ba, like that. So I learned a lot from Phil in that respect.
Very often in reality, when I film reference for my scene, maybe my character has to do a few specific motions. I'll film it, and a lot of times, even if I do it in a way that feels very natural and believable, and I really get my head into the character's head, sometimes even that performance is going to feel very like timed to a metronome. I'll do one action, another action, another action, and another action. 1, 2, 3, 4, boring, boring, boring.
When you're planning out your scene and you throw your poses in, it's kind of like boom, 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 boom. You need to just make sure that you spread things out enough and develop a nice feel through it. And that's something that I work pretty hard to avoid that even sort of feel of a shot.
If I'm going to pick up a bottle of water, maybe it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe you could break up that timing into something a little more dynamic, a little more interesting by exaggerating those spaces once again. You can create something, maybe it's just more interesting to look at, that's timed like this, where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I don't think that the drinking from the bottle example is working out. Do it again. So you guys get the idea that you want to exaggerate the spaces in between those actions to create a timing that is less predictable, less robotic, less metronome style, less boring.
You have a gut, an innate gut on timing, and I will go farther than makes me comfortable. I'll go until I get uncomfortable with something, and then I'll change it. And just to force myself to do something that I wouldn't normally do. Because I think right now I'm not getting phrasing like I want to be and like I should be. So, okay, I think there's something broken or something could be better or whatever. And so this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make myself be uncomfortable. Because then I know I'm doing something that's new. That's my own internal gauge of that I'm doing something new because I'm uncomfortable with it. And, if it doesn't work, you just slide it over and it's done.
There's a lot of motion capture now in computer animation. And even that, it's like when you're dealing with motion capture, sometimes it loses some of the punch and the communication gets lost somehow. Things are so subtle that you lose the idea. The idea of your scene isn't getting across. So even with that, we can take that information and we can exaggerate it and make sure that things are clear and that they read to the audience. And so even with motion capture, things can be pushed.
Once again, animation is an art form that you can inform and infuse with your point of view and your ideas, and exaggerating those ideas and exaggerating that point of view is one of, the most special parts of being an animator. Another area where you can really be thinking about exaggeration is with ideas.
Exaggeration is very important in animation because it will convey information to the audience.
According to John Lasseter, the director of Toy Story, exaggeration is accentuating the essence of an idea via the design and the action. Now, essentially, the important part of that to me is the essence of the idea. You're exaggerating the essence of it.
So you can really break it down and find those key things that are the essence of a squirrel or of an elephant or of a water balloon or a beach ball, and just really tap into those things. And at their basic level, you tap into that, and then you you use that and you find ways to bring that into your character and push it in a way that you're like, oh, that's like a squirrel, that moves like a little mouse, and you're like, cool, and literally it's just a ball with a tail, and I don't know, it's just, to me that's exaggeration. It's like really finding those key things in life and then pushing them or pulling back and minimizing on them.
You know, in the beginning when I started to be an animator, it was always like, wow, great animation, you want great animation, but as you become a seasoned animator, you realize you just want to get a reaction from the people looking at it.
If you want the audience to see it and know what's going on, you need to lead them down that path. You need to lead their eye. You need to let them know this is an important moment. So you push it a little further so that in a subtle way, and maybe even in a subconscious way, they're getting more out of that idea than they otherwise would.
In this example of a Popeye clip, we start the scene out with Olive Oyl doing an exaggerated dance. That dance gets erratic and it slows down again once Popeye comes onto the screen. Popeye is going to have an exaggerated pose to draw the viewer's eye away from Olive Oyl onto Popeye. If Olive Oyl's dance was still in its fastest mode, then the viewer probably wouldn't notice Popeye in there if Popeye didn't have his held drawing. After that, we will see Bluto reach for Olive Oyl in an exaggerated pose as well, grab onto her, and you'll have a super exaggerated moment where he slams Olive Oyl against the wall. Her pose, she's going to stick to the wall, which is exaggerated in the timing. She'll then fall to the ground. Then our two characters will walk together, which will draw the eye over to that side of the screen. So the point of exaggerations in this scene is to make sure the viewer's eye is going where the director is intending the eye to go in order to tell the story.
Now I'm not so much afraid anymore of making sure I did the right thing, but making sure at least that I did something that was clear.
Clarity is huge in animation. You always hear people talk about clarity of ideas, of poses, of joke, of personality, of emotion, all those things. And exaggeration will take you a long way towards things feeling more clear.
When I videotape myself, I think that I'll be able to use it verbatim, and then I often discover that I can't. And it's always a different area that looks weird. Something doesn't read properly, so I have to exaggerate it, or something, just seems too fast, or so I end up having to fudge things around a little bit afterwards. Anyway, there's never been a performance that I've done where I videotape myself and then I just look at it and I put it in the computer and it's like, wow, I just traced myself.
If you're going to have a joke happen in a scene, you want to make sure that it's noticed by the audience, right? You want them to know what happened. You want them to find it funny. And the only way that they're going to find it funny is if your joke was clear, if the gag was staged in a way that they could read what was going on, and if the ideas are exaggerated slightly to the point where they really get what's happening.
I've messed up a lot of big shots by, like, this is a big shot, so I'm going to pack in, like, this. I'm going to make him, like, look over this way before he grabs this, and then he'll do this, and then just like, all you had to do was just whatever the basic thing in the shot is. If you do that, that is going to end up being better. And if you look at, like, really good stuff, it's always really simple. Especially, like, Aardman stuff, it's just, like, very simple and very clear and always good.
I think the most important thing about when you're attempting a shot is to really know what the shot is about.
Say, he seems to be a bit worse. Tell me, little fellow, what seems to be troubling you? I don't know, Doc. I just keep hearing things.
You're just going to exaggerate whatever it is that helps get your idea across and make sure that it doesn't distract from whatever the main goal of the scene is.
The more you add in, the more chances there are you'll confuse what you're trying to do or screw something up.
It's so easy to lose focus. When you're in production and you know you'll have 5 days to do it and you just gotta go. And it's so easy to just do walk cycles and do this and not really, and then everything becomes blended together and it has no life to it.
The same way that a photographer can use light to lead the eye of his viewers through a photograph, or to highlight a particular part of a photograph. The same way a photographer uses light to tell a story, we can use exaggeration to inform our scenes, to show the audience, this is what we want you to notice, or we don't want you to miss this gag, or we want you to really notice this one part of the scene, or this one part of the motion. And in a lot of ways, you can use exaggeration to even make movements more believable than they otherwise would be. You know, maybe you want to exaggerate some force, or exaggerate the weight of an object to really sell the idea that, oh, it's heavy, or he's really pushing hard, or whatever it is you're trying to sell.
If you're putting a period on the end of a sentence or something and you want that to really sell, then what you do before then really affects how that gets delivered, right? I mean, this is kind of an acting thing, but I think phrasing can be a huge part of that, where if it's really, really busy, and then still, you know, you're going to drive that point home, you know, with much more success than busy, period, and still like whatever. You know, you lose it. It's the moment's gone.
If you want the audience to really see that I'm putting my ring down, I'm not just going to drop it down. I'm going to sort of do something with it so it catches the audience's eye, knows that the character's going to do something with it, put it in an arc, and exaggerate putting it down so the audience knows something's going to happen with that ring later. So exaggerate the character's actions so the audience knows what's going on in relation to the story point.
This guy, Dario Fo, is one of the best for commedia dell'arte, actually, in Italy. And I was so lucky to have a seminar with him, and it's things like that, like all this exaggeration. I remember he was doing an exercise that is really, really funny. No, the guy was with a glass, and he was talking to you, and he was talking and trying to drink, but at that time that you are gonna drink, when the guy was talking, he was doing that like for 5-10 minutes, no? And at the end, it's like, okay, well, could you please tell me what you feel right now? And obviously, everyone was thirsty, no? Everyone was like, okay, I want to drink that glass of water. Please do it, no?
A scene can be entirely different depending on what you as the animator choose to exaggerate. So let's say, for example, you're given the task of animating a scene where a guy is helping this girl unload her luggage and carry it into a hotel, or something like that. He's the bellboy at this hotel, and this woman arrives, and his job is to get the bags into her room, right? And so your job as the animator is to decide what that scene is all about. If that scene is all about the fact that this bellhop, it's his job to be subservient and to like do anything she says and carry bags no matter how heavy they are, then maybe what you should exaggerate is how heavy the bags are and make them like the heaviest bags ever. And he just really has to struggle to carry them at all, and how he chooses to do that will tell us a lot about his character. If he does it, with a smile and grace and doesn't want her to think that he thinks that they're really heavy, you get an idea of who he is. Or if he's doing it really grumpy and just like slamming stuff around, then you get an idea that this guy doesn't really like his job much and maybe he's kind of a jerk. But if the point of the scene is that he's in love with this girl, for example, well, that's going to be totally different. He sees this girl, maybe she still has her heavy bags, but if the point of that whole scene is to show that he has like this instant love for this person, like I've fallen in love like right away, love at first sight with this girl, okay, and I'm the bellhop. If you're animating that, you can't exaggerate the weight of the bags too much, because you probably want to be exaggerating his body language more, maybe his facial stuff, his eyes, his brows, his expression. You want to be exaggerating things that are telling the audience, hey, audience, hey, the bellhop's in love with the girl, right? That's what you want to tell them. Not that the bags are really heavy. Who cares about the bags? You probably still want to exaggerate the weight of the bags a little bit, just so that they have weight in that animated world. But the point is, if you're trying to tell the audience that he's in love with her, and you exaggerate how much the bags weigh, people are going to pay more attention to that. They're going to pay more attention to his struggle and the physicality of moving these things around, instead of noticing the subtle interplay in his face of, wow, he's in love with her, and, that's kind of the fun thing about our job. We get to figure that stuff out. And just you need to be really careful not to choose the wrong thing to exaggerate, because if you pick the wrong thing, the audience is going to be confused, and at best, they're at least not going to get out of the scene what they could have.
When you're mucking up the main idea of the scene by having secondary characters overstaging the main point of the scene. Kind of like that. I'm talking right now, and Kevin Bartel's taking the spotlight. Okay, getting too close. Oh, there it is. Oh.
The minute your shot goes on screen, the scariest thing to have is a really silent, audience, and then your shot, playing 10 times, and people are still this, In
a good acting scene, with the exception of a few transitional moments, you should be able to, pause it on pretty much any frame, and the basic emotion should be readable on that one frame. You should really be able to tell what the emotion of a character is right away. You want the audience to see it, your scene, and know right away, that character is devastated, or that character is ecstatic, whatever it is you're going for.
And then sometimes some of the shots aren't meant to get a ha-ha-ha laugh, but at least people are okay, yeah, he's pissed, or wow, that was kind of intense. So it's if you can at least get a rise, then at least you did something that was clear.
Exaggerating personality traits can be huge for you, because it can really bring your character to life in this bigger than life way. If your character is sad in a scene, if it fits for the scene, why not push that into ultimate devastation or something, just to see what it's like.
If you have an angry character, have him stomping all over the place when he's walking. If you have a sad character, like I said, have him dragging his feet no matter where he goes.
It's being able to know, okay, this character is like a squirrel, and it's really fast, and, you can do that kind of stuff really quick with your character and exaggerate what a squirrel might do. I mean, you can take that just into a ball, the ball with the tail, and that's a squirrel now.
Where you decide to put the emphasis of exaggeration will even adjust and change character, feeling of character. How bouncy they are will give them more of a light, happy attitude, right? How heavy they are and how little up and down you get can give them a feeling of possibly depressed.
Exaggeration can help you get to the heart of the character.
You're going to have a happy character. He's going to be a little bit lighter than everyone else, so you can sort of break the laws of physics with him sometimes, and gravity kind of lets him free a little bit.
Man, it's you read so much into this kind of stuff, but it really works, and it's really there.
That's what's going to give your character life, and that's what's going to let people be more interested in watching your short or your film or your character and paying attention, and they're going to be getting a lot more out of that character. And believe it or not, they're going to be identifying more with a character that has exaggerated emotions or exaggerated personality traits, because a caricature in that sense can almost feel more believable than reality.
Exaggeration and character whatever. Exaggeration and caricature, are kind of to me, hand in hand.
Exaggeration is a caricature. It's caricaturing whether it's anything from movement to personality. It's timing and the ideas of your scene. It's all of that. It encompasses all of that. It's applicable to all of that.
If you have a caricature of, let's say, a politician in a newspaper, for example, look at that picture of them, and in some ways, that's more evocative than a photograph of that politician, because whoever has done that caricaturization is probably exaggerating the most identifiable parts of that person. Maybe the character has, in real life, kind of bigger ears. They're just slightly. Maybe the ears are just stick out just a little bit. They're a little bit of this instead of that. But in the drawing, they're like this, right? And they're totally sticking way out. In some ways, that almost tells us who he is more than a photograph would, because we've all subtly and maybe subconsciously noticed these little character traits or these little personality traits.
It's just like a story in a bar. You're going to tell a story to somebody. What are you going to do? You're going to embellish it. What's another word for embellishment? Exaggeration. You want to entertain the audience the best you can.
We're exaggerating the things that we want them to see, the things that we want them to take home with them, what we want them to remember and get out of the character, out of the story. We're exaggerating very carefully chosen moments and actions that lend our character a deeper foundation of believability. And because we, as the artists, get to choose what those moments are, we're informing that scene with our own vision and our own point of view.
You're taking the story and you're telling it through characters, and really the bottom line is you need to connect with the audience. And you need the audience to believe that this is not an animated character, that this character is just alive. And they're sold. You know, if they spend too much time thinking about, oh, this is animated and studying it, I mean, as an animator you do that anyway, but you know, you should be lost in the moment, and that's the animator's job, is to, you know, lose you in the moment. So that you, as an audience member, you're saying, I believe that that's real.
How much is too much? That's a question we hear a lot. Exaggerate, push it, double it. You know, we're saying all these things. But at a certain point, you know, that's a really valid question. How much is too much? Well, the answer is it depends 100% on the scene, on the character, what's going on, what the context of the story is 100% scene specific for how much is too much. And it's character specific, and it's style specific. If you're doing a really wacky piece, you know, you could probably put in 10 times the amount of exaggeration that you can put into a photorealistic piece.
The minimizing stuff comes a little more when you're talking about live action type animation, where you're matching reference or you're matching plates to a character, because that stuff's got to be just right. And if you really exaggerate things too much, it looks wrong.
Now, one thing about exaggeration is that it is not random.
Timing is very crucial, especially in the real world. You know, when you're doing something cartoony, you can get away with that, but when you're doing something that's in relation to live action, timing is a very dangerous thing to mess with.
Exaggeration should be adding life without losing the aspect of believability in your scene.
You know, you're going to want to use exaggeration just to try and get your idea across and make it stronger. But I think that once you've gone too far, it won't look like it's humanly possible anymore. It won't seem like you're just pushing something. It'll start to seem ridiculous.
If you just get in there and start exaggerating everything, it's just going to look like crazy wacky spaghetti and the guy's moving around everywhere and the audience doesn't know where to look, right? It's going to look freaking insane.
You don't want to hit thousands of olive oil poses like in the old Popeye cartoons, because you're going to confuse the audience and they're going to sit there and they're going to say, what the hell is this character doing?
Now, how do you know when you've gone too far? And the answer is you've gone too far when you lose the audience. You've gone too far when a joke doesn't read, or a personality trait is confused, or when a story point gets lost in the muddly hubbub of whatever other actions you've been exaggerating. So really the way to know is to show your work to somebody, to get some feedback from, you know, get feedback from your mom or your neighbor or your friend or anybody. Anybody can give you feedback on animation. Anybody. They can, you know, maybe your mom won't be able to tell you how to fix it, but your mom will be able to tell you whether or not she understands what's going on.
The best way to discover if you've gone too far in exaggeration is to get a second pair of eyes on that shot. They could tell you whether or not if it's reading too much. If you've under-exaggerated, they'll let you know if you didn't exaggerate it enough. And they'll also let you know if they think the audience will be lost in what you're trying to describe.
Now, your mom probably wouldn't be the best person to ask, because your mom's going to probably want to be, you know, a little extra encouraging, and mom is definitely not the most impartial judge of your work. So you might want to expand beyond the realm of family.
I think most animators, and I think all good animators, get feedback on their stuff from either co-workers, or you're going to be getting feedback in dailies, or from the director, or from all sorts of different sources. And I think everybody's going to have something good to offer you, good ideas, things that you didn't think about, because you get there's sort of a tunnel vision thing that happens when you start working, and you start to you lose sight of your scene and what you're trying to communicate. And somebody will, you know, whether they're an animator or not, you know, what's going to end up happening with your animation is it's going to be seen by people that aren't animators, and they have to understand what's going on too. So all feedback is good feedback.
Yeah, I think when you've gone too far with exaggeration is when you're aware of it, when you're aware of what you've done, and it's taking the spotlight away from the main communicative idea that you're trying to get across. So whether it be an action, an anticipation to an action, or when you've pushed it too far, or it be another character in the scene taking your focus away from what we want to be focusing on, whether it's an emotion, or if you have a character, for instance, you want to get into the inner psyche of your character or personality in a particular scene, and we're kind of slowly pushing in, but he's doing all these gestures with his hand when we're really wanting to see what's going on internally versus externally. That would be over-exaggerated animation.
You can exaggerate a lot of emotions as long as you're balancing those emotional exaggerations with realistic moments in the emotion that the audience can grab onto as little anchor points to follow along and to keep up. And if you've over-exaggerated certain aspects, they either are going to be unclear or they're going to distract from whatever it is you were trying to put across in the first place. Without a doubt, weight is one of the most difficult things to portray in animation. And unfortunately, without weight, well, your stuff looks fake right off the bat. So it's not only one of the more difficult things to portray, but it's one of the more essential things to portray.
In order to show weight in a character, you have to exaggerate his timing to make him slower, and you have to exaggerate his poses to show that weight is affecting this guy, pulling him down. Weight loves fat people. And I know from experience.
Our job as animators is to exaggerate that and actually make it come across. And so for something like that, it's like you can use the live action reference, but then you have to push it. You have to take it beyond live action to actually make it read on camera. So it's like those are things you're going to want to exaggerate. Weight, you're going to want to exaggerate that up and down. You're going to want that stuff to be bigger than life, to actually make it look like life.
Even in a wacky motion or an exaggerated motion, weight is very important to lending your characters that bit of believability, or to help the audience to base whatever it is that they're seeing, on a foundation of real world physics. No matter how wacky it is, the wackiness is simply exaggerations of whatever happens in the real world. All the wackiness is either exaggerated aspects of reality, movement-wise, body mechanics-wise, or really exaggerated timing. But those exaggerations are based in reality.
Maybe it's just describing weight, putting a little more emphasis on it than we normally would pay attention to sort of say to people, look how heavy this is just for this one moment, to sort of add to the believability of the shot. Use it as that tool,
Focus on weight, figure out those body mechanics, figure out, how it works, that if you're getting up out of a chair, you can't get up out of the chair until your hips are, scooched above your feet. You can't lift up your right foot unless you move your hips over your left foot, otherwise you're going to fall down. These are very, basic principles of weight. Some of these, we talk about in other classes, in the walk classes, or the heavy walk, and, force, and all these things, where we really get deep into those things. But you really need to focus on at least getting a general idea of how body mechanics work as far as weight is concerned, if you want your demo reel to stand out to recruiters.
And a lot of it comes from observation and just a feeling for it. So it's kind of hard to teach. I mean, there are some direct rules that you can use that, the heavier the object, the more, the slower, the bigger the anticipation. The heavier an object, the more force it takes to set it in motion and to stop it in motion, stop it from moving. So, so obviously, bigger anticipation if, a fat character is going to get off the chair and things like that. And larger, heavier objects tend to move a little slower. But those two things by themselves is still not enough.
Particularly for animation tests, let's say you're doing tests where, it's a throw or a climb or a pull or a push or, jump. Exaggerating those aspects of whatever the body mechanics are going on in those different tests, exaggerating those things as far as you can is the best way to sell to recruiters the fact that you know how to do it. The fact that you know what, if something is super heavy, look, I know how to animate it. Or if somebody's picking up something really heavy, check it out. I totally know how to do it.
I weigh probably 65, 70 pounds, and if Delio is going to pick me up, it's really easy for him. See, look, how easy is that? Like, he didn't no strain. But for your animation reel, or for animation purposes, he might want to make it look like that was a little bit more work, unless the point of the scene was that I'm really light. So for an animation scene, he might want to struggle a little bit more and pretend that how did you do that? So if I were to pick him up. No exaggeration, that was the best I could do. You just picked up 210 pounds. Yes! New world champion!
Those are the really difficult aspects to sell on a reel. It's hard to find animators who understand weight, or who really understand force, or animators that can do a baseball pitch and they really understand the lead and follow and sequential breaking of joints that are happening in the body and the arcs and all those things that are going into it. If you can really find tests that you push the ideas of much further than they might be in reality, that's your best bet for a demo reel.
Especially in computer animation, weight gets lost a lot because of I'm sure you've heard of things being spliny and things looking floaty. So you're going to want to try and get away from that look the most you can, doing anything to make it look not floaty and spliny. So if something's going to be heavy, make it really heavy so that you can actually see those forces and see how it affects the body and see the strain, see all of that stuff. You want it to show up. You don't want it to be invisible. You don't want it to, there's a time and place for that, but for your demo reel, you're really going to want to show that you can show weight, and show timing, and show those things. So you want to exaggerate all those things the most you can.
Don't animate a guy picking up, a 10-pound weight. Animate a guy trying to pick up a 100-pound weight. And that's going to really sell the fact that you know what the body mechanics are. Because a guy picking up a 10-pound weight doesn't have to do very much. It's kind of boring to watch anyway. Why do that? Just go for it, man. Just push it.
I find I always have to, say, just add a couple more frames on this to make sure, on the step down that it's really reading is like he's really absorbing the weight and getting ready to go back up, and just like I always have to be pushing it, I guess. I'll get this feeling like, okay, I should start him up, and then I'll be like, no, I'll do like 2 or 3 more frames, and then always I'm like, I could have done more. And I guess the weight comes from your decisions on the timing, and it's kind of just practice will get it.
Generally speaking, especially for demo reel purposes, it's a really bad idea to have a lot of weightless, floaty characters running around that don't seem like gravity is affecting them at all. That's going to get your reel dropped in the can quicker than a lot of things.
I guess to sum up, exaggeration will help you sell ideas and story points. If you under-exaggerate things, you might lose the audience. If you over-exaggerate things, you might confuse the audience.
There's so many different ways that you can exaggerate a scene, and there's, you can exaggerate the pose, and then, you can make it dynamic and, really make things graphic and stand out. You can exaggerate the timing. You can give things a little zip and a little bit of punch where you need it, just to spruce up your scene. You can exaggerate the personality. If he's, being sinister, you can really squint down those eyes and give little shifty looks and do different things like that. And then you can exaggerate the idea. And the idea, I think, encompasses what we're trying to do. We're trying to communicate thoughts and ideas, and that's done by exaggerating the poses, the timing, and the personality of the character.
So that's it. Head on over to the assignment page, see what your next assignment's going to be, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what you guys exaggerate.
All right. Why don't you start it?
Otherwise, if Olive Oil kept her dance up throughout the entire... Oh, shit.
What you decide to exaggerate and how you decide to do it will dictate a lot of... It's easy to miss something that's just... It's easy to miss something.
I totally agree.
Right? Exaggeration. When you over-exaggerate something in a scene in particular, it's when you have... That was awesome.
Yeah!